tens of thousands of vaccine doses just sitting unclaimed in our state. Coloradans didn't want those appointments. More than half the slots at mass vaccination clinics across the state were empty last week. We have shifted from a supply issue to what one health advocate told us was persuasion and logistics. Here's Mark Salinger.
Colorado has 6 mass vaccination sites around the state. You can walk right up and get a shot without an appointment now, and there's good reason for it. Of the 88,397 appointments available at these sites in the past week, more than 48,000 went unfilled. That's 55% of all doses allocated to mass vaccination sites going unused at these locations.
The vast majority of Coloradans, upwards of 80%, are willing to get the vaccine, are interested in getting the vaccine.
The majority of unfilled appointments were in southern Colorado. At the Colorado State Fairground mass vaccination site in Pueblo, the state says only 20% of the 21,000 doses allocated to the site last week were actually administered there. FEMA says there was one day when less than 200 people showed up for 3,000 available doses. At the Broadmoor World Arena in Colorado Springs, just over 20% of available appointments last week were filled. That's more than 10,000 appointments left open.
The people that really wanted it have gotten it.
Doses allocated to mass vaccination sites that go unused can be redistributed to community vaccination sites around the state. Just over half of all eligible people in Colorado have now been vaccinated with at least one dose.
We've reached a point where supply really isn't much of an issue, and it's more about persuasion and logistics.
Jake Williams is the executive director of Healthier Colorado. The organization started a campaign to try and convince people on the fence about getting vaccinated. They've called hundreds of thousands of phones and set up more than 2,000 appointments.
We can target our outreach to reach those groups that we believe are going to be most challenging, show up with messages that we know will especially resonate with those groups.
The outreach is targeted by demographics and where people live, much like political campaigns do. The goal is to get those empty appointments filled up again. So where are people still getting the vaccine? More than 90% of the 15,000 appointments that were available at Dick's Sporting Goods Park last week went filled. That was almost all of them. Here in Denver at Ball Arena, as well as up at the ranch in Larimer County, both of those locations had more than 50% of their appointments filled as well, Kyle.
So, Mark, it sounds like the strategy to convince people to take the vaccine or to get through these logistical challenges becomes a very personal one-on-one thing.
Yeah, Healthier Colorado is planning to go out and do some canvassing. That could mean knocking on doors of people that they're trying to persuade, as well as setting up shop in front of a grocery store, trying to tell people about the vaccine and facts about the vaccine and signing people up for those appointments.
All right. Mark Salinger reporting from the scenic Salinger Skyscape. Hospitalization numbers are still rising in our state. 622 patients at last check. That's up 16 in a day, up 69 patients from this time last week. So throughout the pandemic, the what is often easier than the why when we talk about these numbers. You got hospitalizations in Colorado that have nearly doubled in the last month. So there's your what, and the why gets tricky. The state epidemiologist today said that it looks like there are variants causing the more serious form of COVID that's landing people in the hospital.
We certainly do believe that variants are contributing to increasing hospitalization rates that we are seeing. We know that particularly with the variant that is most common in Colorado right now, which is the B117 or UK variant, that there is some evidence that that variant does cause more severe illness, is more likely to result in hospitalization. And so that is likely playing out here, where we know that probably more than half of our cases in the state right now are due to variants.
Because these hospitalization numbers, you can't brush off all these new cases as not serious or in younger people or whatever, because you see 600 people in the hospital. And I was curious whether all those cases in the hospital are being tested for the variants, and apparently not. The state lab continues to look at about 7% of all of the positive test results statewide. No special focus on the test results coming back from hospitalized patients. So at the moment, we have no hard evidence to back up the state epidemiologist's hunch that it is those variants driving the hospitalization numbers. Our 7-day positivity rate on testing is now over 6%, highest that average has been since the beginning of the year. This again is the measure of how widely, how easily the virus is spreading in our community. Yesterday's single-day number was almost double the limit that experts recommend, a positivity of 9.6%. So we know that COVID's out there, and it is churning through the 70% of Coloradans who are not fully vaccinated. We've got almost 30% of the state that's completed the process, more than 1.7 million people. Then you got another 800,000 people who are waiting on their second dose of Pfizer or Moderna. You drive I-25 through Denver, and you probably know that pinch point, that sticky spot near 6th Avenue where traffic tends to back up. Options on what to do physically with that part of the interstate are limited because you got the Platte on one side, you got a railroad line on the other. Guess which one can't be moved? Here's our Marshall Zellinger.
By real estate standards, it's a real fixer-upper. Plenty of potential if you've got time and $50 million.
It's one of those opportunities of a lifetime for the state to improve mobility through Denver and also for the entire state.
Nick Farber is the director of CDOT's High Performance Transportation Enterprise. You know HPTE for the toll lanes added to US 36, I-25, and C-470. HPTE perhaps wants to be better known for what it's considering at Burnham Yard, east of I-25, north of 6th Avenue.
By acquiring the property allows the state and CDOT to look into front range rail options.
We've talked about Burnham Yard for the last 2 years. 61 acres, an old rail yard. HPTE is close to finally buying it next month. Right now, I-25 is pinched between a river and a railroad. But with Burnham Yard, the highway could expand because the railroad could be moved there, along with expanded light rail lines and a future Front Range railroad that could connect Pueblo to Fort Collins.
The majority of the land will be used for non-transportation purposes.
And that's where Jeff Kraft in the state's Office of Economic Development comes in. About 45 of the acres, 75% of the land, could be developed. That's why the state's Economic Development Office is providing $7.5 of the $50 million needed to buy the land.
When you invest in infrastructure, it attracts employers and workers and facilitates economic growth. Redeveloping a rail yard is an incredible economic development tool that's being pursued globally.
Kraft pointed to projects across the world, turning old rail yards into interactive spaces, from Milan, Italy, to Hudson Yards in New York, and what used to be the western terminus for the Transcontinental Railroad in Sacramento. That's where the Economic Development Office could see a return on its investments.
Longer term, if some of the state money stays in the deal, this is going to be incredibly valuable land that will be sold off to private developers. And so that's another potential source of paying back the funds to the state taxpayers.
Here is an interesting sidebar. Front Range Rail, the train that could go from Pueblo to Fort Collins right through Burnham Yard. Today at the state capitol, lawmakers were debating a bill that would create the Front Range Passenger Rail District, a collection of counties whose residents would be asked to approve a sales tax one day to pay for the railroad. Kyle, Boulder County is included in that. So another story out of this will be convincing Boulder County residents to pay for a sales tax for a promised rail line.
Ah, yes, the old fool me once, shame on RTD, fool me twice, shame on me. That could be a tough sell.
Yeah, and that's going to be CDOT's issue this time, and they could sell it in a different way, saying that this is all that money pays for. It couldn't go to other parts like what RTD had to do. Oh, that train we promised you, we had to pay for other parts of RTD. This will be, you pay into this tax, it goes to the railroad. But that's years away still.
Personally, I'm just thrilled about the idea of that rail yard being transformed into a hip new neighborhood where bros drunkenly shout off of balconies at all hours of the day. Beautiful. Thank you, Marshall. Hey, remember those ads that blasted the idea of a public health insurance option? Our friend Marshall put the healthcare industry's claims to the truth test, and the truth is, on that issue, they won this week. Democrats in the state legislature backed down from their public option proposal. Reminder, this does not impact people who get their insurance through their employer. It would only impact the 8% or so of Coloradans who purchase their insurance on the individual market. Here's what happened. The new bill still aims to get insurance companies to lower premiums. Instead of 20% over 2 years, it would be a lowering of 18% over 3 years. And then after that, premiums could start going up again. old version of the bill, the one that the health insurance industry hated, threatened a state public option if insurance companies failed to reduce premiums enough. The new version, though, gets kind of muddy. It allows providers to talk their way out of why they could not lower premiums. I get it. That's dense. A lot of words on your screen. Bottom line, Democrats at the state legislature again tried to limit hospital and insurance rates for people on the individual market in our state. And again, for another year, hospitals and insurance providers seem to have won. Douglas County commissioners, the ones who tried to take out health officials during a pandemic, are now trying to take each other out. It's awkward. We are a ways from an ocean, but you know how lighthouses keep ships from crashing into the land? It is the opposite for the lights of our houses and birds. The light can cause them to crash land here. That's next. So there's going to be an independent investigation into the inside claims that Colorado was faking pollution data so the state could go easy on industrial polluters. 3 whistleblowers accused the state's Air Pollution Control Division of breaking the law when issuing air pollution permits and just straight up faking info to slip past air quality standards. Democratic Attorney General Phil Weiser plans to bring in an outside investigator to look at this. The state health director told our partners at Colorado Politics that they'll respect this process, this outside investigation, but she said that they're confident that they followed the law. Douglas County Commissioners' meetings are now slathered in awkward sauce after a failed attempt by 2 of the commissioners to permanently strip the third one of her role as chair. These are Republicans who are turning on a fellow Republican. Republican Commissioner Laura Thomas is the target. She said that the 2 other GOP commissioners, Abe Layden and George Teal, voted during a work session, small meeting, to remove her as board chair. She called on her supporters to show up to come to her defense before today's final vote. Now, this is politics, clearly, but it is not entirely clear who is accusing who of what specifically. There's a lot of back and forth. Layden and Teal said that Thomas abused her power and was deceitful in advancing her political interests. Today, they backed off their plan to censure her and remove her as chair. They were looking out at a room full of her supporters.
As a female Republican woman, we do not have in Colorado very much female leadership that we can look to.
Many of us who voted for Laura did not vote for Laura because of her style. We voted for her because of her substance. And her substance, the thing that Laura just over and over and over asked, is this the proper role of government? Is this the proper role of government? Is this the proper role of government? I like that.
Douglas County, of course, is reliably red in terms of politics. Though Democrats have at least kind of put up a fight in the last couple of elections, that led some in the crowd to say that these Republicans dragging each other through the mud publicly only helps their opponents. The commissioners voted today that they are going to rotate the chair position for 30 days, kind of like the children's game. And then after that, they'll revisit their conflict.
Clash of seasons for Colorado, with the storm bringing heavy rain to Denver, heavy snow to the high country, and severe storms on the eastern plains. Temperatures were cooler, but where that front is stalled out is where we're seeing some of the heavier thunderstorms overnight tonight. Severe thunderstorm watch for Denver out until 7, and then we'll see some scattered heavy showers overnight with a bit of thunder. The heavy thunderstorms keep going on the eastern plains, and 6 to 12 inches of snow for the high country could make for a tricky drive on I-70 overnight. Winter storm warning continues for the Colorado high country through noon tomorrow. And in Denver, we're going to see that heavy rain overnight, maybe a half an inch to an inch of rain, but possibly cold enough to see that rain mixed with snow by the morning. Cloudy and 35 with a severe thunderstorm watch till 7. Midday clearing tomorrow, cool 54. And then look at the warming trend. Mid-70s Friday, 80s for the weekend. The next round of showers comes in Sunday night into Monday.
Of course, spring in Colorado means that some of us get snow while others get storms. It's intense, like the poetic stylings of meteorologist and wordsmith Corey Reppenhagen.
Corey Reppenhagen is on the weather beat.
Thunderstorms amaze, size, scope, power, and beauty. Nature humbles man.
That was Corey Reppenhagen on the weather beat.
Huge flocks of birds and blue skies only tells a small part of the migration story.
Most of our terrestrial birds migrate at night.
Just like driving in the dark, flying in the dark has its own set of challenges. We can make it easier on the birds. Seems the least we could do. Next. You hear folks say nothing good happens after midnight. That really is disrespectful to bird migration, you know? 80% of migratory birds do their business in the middle of the night. Our porch lights can mess with their functions. It's why Denver Audubon would like a word with you about something called Lights Out Colorado.
Birds are important to humans in so many different ways. First of all, we have bird watchers who love watching them. There he is. They are indicators of how well our ecosystem is doing. Yeah, so that bird is a bush tit. So there's a lot of benefits to having birds in our lives. Yeah, we have a whole flock of red-winged blackbirds out there. Hi, I am Susie Hiskey. I am the Conservation Coordinator for Denver Audubon. Lights Out Colorado is a new campaign in Colorado. There's starlings intermixed with other blackbirds to promote turning our lights out to help bird migration. Yeah, so that's a turkey vulture, and they tend to migrate during the day. Our birds are moving through Colorado right now. They're just starting their journeys to come back for spring and summer. 80% of our songbirds and other birds that migrate do so during the nighttime hours. And a lot of birds navigate using the stars as well as other types of features that you can see in the evening. So they're going to be flying at night primarily, and that's why we need to minimize the light pollution that's being emitted up into the skies. The one on the ground is a white-crowned sparrow. The more we can reduce the lights in our cities and towns, the better opportunity our birds are going to have to get to where they're going.
She really knows her birds. That was very impressive. I was like, there's a big one, there's a little one. She knew all the names. Photojournalist Corky Scholl brought us that story. So, 2 steps if you want to do the birds a solid. Denver Audubon asks that you don't let your outdoor lights shine directly upward if they're not kind of shield them so they're beaming down. And they ask if you'd consider turning off your outdoor lights by midnight now through the end of May. A bird trying to learn more about migration, I have to assume, is the most Colorado thing we saw today. I mean, why else would there be a hawk in the Longmont Library if not looking for materials on migration? Librarians think this hawk, which they have named Tony, came in through an open door. Tony Hawk spent most of his time near the poetry section, so perhaps I am mistaken. Tony had to get a vet checkup because he went beak first into a couple of windows trying to get out. The library is currently closed to the public due to the pandemic, with a one-time exception for said hawk. You get the final word around here, good, bad, or otherwise. I've noticed we don't get a lot of otherwise feedback, tends to be good or bad, and we'll share it next. David writes in tonight, he's not buying this Lights Out Colorado for bird migration thing. He writes, thieves also migrate at night. I'll leave my lights on. David, maybe you could meet the birds halfway and just ensure that your outdoor lights are beaming down this time of year, unless you're worried about thieves coming in via parachute. Sean says, adults getting vaccinated means the next wave of COVID is going to be kids. Sean says, worried, she's working a K through 8. Terrifies me, Sean said. We know complications in kids are rare, and you hope those school adults are vaccinated. You just don't want them bringing it home to a vulnerable person.